Okay, so now let's combine the classical school of economics and the attributes that we just talked about with the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model that we talked about previously in chapter 6. So if you recall, that model looks like this. There's some aggregate demand. There's some short-run aggregate supply. And this is a price level. And a certain price level corresponds to a certain quantity of real GDP. And that, in fact, is a picture, again, of the short-run economy and the output of a short-run economy. How's that economy doing? Yeah, we don't know because we have to add in the long-run aggregate supply. And if we make it look like this, everything looks pretty good because that economy is in equilibrium, right? Because the output, the quantity of real GDP being produced in the short run is equal to the quantity of real GDP at full employment in the long run. So that's what an economy in equilibrium looks like. And what's kind of weird and almost kind of creepy is, if you recall, we had an assignment on page 143 in the workbook, and it's that assignment, that example that was used in the workbook, it's kind of coming true. It's kind of what we're seeing happen to us right now. So in the workbook on page 143, it said, blah, 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 blah. According to the classical model, if the economy is initially in long-run equilibrium, okay, so there we go, long-run equilibrium, and a negative event causes aggregate demand to shift to the left. Well, guess what the coronavirus has done, right? It has definitely caused a leftward shift in terms of demand. And so now, what's that called, right? When the output in the short run is less than, what do we have? We've got a gap right here. What kind of gap do we have? Well, we have a recessionary gap because the output in the short run is less than the long run equilibrium. And to understand how the classical school of economics would explain this, or explain how this economy is going to fix itself, and to really understand a self-correcting economy in the long run, look at what happens here. So the first thing that happens is that you would expect sales to do what? Drop off. And that's exactly what you're seeing in the economy right now. Sales overall down. Not things like toilet paper and pizzas, but overall, once you aggregate all goods and services, sales are down. Once sales fall, what happens to production? Well, if sales get soft, then production also falls or decreases. And if production decreases, and again, what's happening in restaurants right now, right? They're in most cases, a lot of cases, they've shut down. And what are they doing with their employees, right? So employment falls or decreases because you don't need all those workers if production is down. And when employment falls, what happens to the labor market? So the labor market, that's my phone, sorry, now has a what? Well, with all those people without jobs, unemployed, the labor market has a surplus. And how does a market clear a surplus? What happens to prices, those flexible prices? It lowers. So according to a self-correcting economy, over time, in the long run, what should happen to the price of labor or wages should fall, right? And as wages fall, recall that wages are an input to production, right? Companies use labor as an input to manufacture goods and services. And as wages decrease, what's going to shift here? Short-run aggregate supply is going to shift with a decrease in input prices, wages, then you'll see a rightward shift of short-run aggregate supply, bringing the economy back into equilibrium. And that's the idea behind a self-correcting economy in the long run.